When his mother looked me up and down at that crystal chandelier dinner and whispered "Ghetto" under her breath, I felt my entire world shatter. But my billionaire fiancé heard every single word. What he did next shocked his family, the media, and even me. He canceled our neighborhood church wedding and booked the Palace of Versailles instead. Before we dive into this incredible story of love, dignity, and standing up against prejudice, hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect regardless of where they come from. And subscribe because I share real stories about overcoming discrimination and discovering your true worth. You know, sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be, even when you don't realize it. That's what happened to me on that crisp Saturday morning when I decided to volunteer at the Southside Community Literacy Center. I'd been going through a challenging time as a third-grade teacher, working long hours for modest pay, watching my students struggle with resources their schools couldn't provide. And my mama always taught me that when life feels heavy, the best thing you can do is lighten someone else's load. I walked into that community center expecting to read books to kids and maybe feel a little more purposeful. What I didn't expect was to meet him. There he was, this tall, handsome man with the warmest smile I'd ever seen, rolling up his sleeves and asking Ms. Patricia, the program director, where he could help. He wasn't there for a photo op or to pad his resume. He was genuinely there to serve. For 3 months, we worked side by side every Saturday morning. He'd show up in faded jeans and worn sneakers, ready to sit cross-legged on those colorful alphabet rugs with the kids. We'd read stories, help with homework, and encourage children who just needed someone to believe in them. During our coffee breaks, we'd sit on those metal folding chairs in the break room and talk about everything. Our dreams, our fears, what we hope to leave behind in this world. He never once mentioned money or status. He just talked about wanting to make a real difference, about how education changed his life and he wanted to pass that gift forward. He told me about growing up with parents who valued achievement over connection, and how he was trying to figure out what mattered most. I started looking forward to those Saturday mornings more than anything else in my week. There was something special about him, something that made me feel seen and valued in a way I'd never experienced before. He'd remember little things I mentioned, that I loved caramel macchiatos, that my favorite book as a kid was Where the Wild Things Are, that I was nervous about my classroom observation coming up. He'd bring me coffee, leave encouraging notes in the books we'd organize, and always walk me to my car after our shifts, even when it was out of his way. I thought he was just a regular guy with a big heart, maybe worked at a nonprofit or taught at a local college. Then one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. We'd just finished reading to a group of energetic first graders, and I was walking to my car like I always did. That's when I saw the sleek black Bentley SUV pull up to the curb, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. "Mr. James," he said professionally. "Your car is ready, sir." I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This man I'd been falling for, this humble, gentle person who sat on the floor reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to 6-year-olds, was being picked up by a private driver in a vehicle that probably cost more than I'd make in 3 years. When he saw the look on my face, he walked over slowly, hands in his pockets, looking almost embarrassed. "Diana," he said softly, my name sounding different coming from his lips now that I knew who he really was. "Can we talk?" I nodded, unable to speak. We sat on the bench outside the center, the same bench where we'd shared our lunch breaks and dreams for the future. Except now everything felt different. "My full name is Robert James," he began, his voice quiet. "I'm the heir to James Global Properties. My family owns real estate across 6 continents. I'm worth... well, the number doesn't matter." He turned to face me, his blue eyes searching mine. "What matters is that everything between us has been real. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment, that was me. The real me. Not the heir, not the businessman. Just Rob." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But my mind was racing. Why would a billionaire spend his Saturdays reading to kids in my neighborhood? Why would he be interested in a third-grade teacher who drove a 10-year-old Honda and lived in a studio apartment? "I know what you're thinking," he continued. "But I volunteer here because it's the one place where people see me for who I am, not what I have. My parents raised me in a world where everything is transactional, where people want something from you. But you. He reached for my hand. You didn't want anything from me. You just wanted to help kids learn to read. That's when I knew you were different. His hand was warm around mine, familiar despite everything that had changed in the last hour. I looked down at our intertwined fingers, remembering all the times we'd sat just like this, talking about lesson plans and which books resonated with the kids. Marcus had finally finished his first chapter book last week, and Rob had been there to celebrate with us, his joy as genuine as my own. How long have you known? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. About me, I mean. That you wanted. I couldn't finish the sentence. That I was falling for you? A sad smile crossed his face. Probably from that first day when you made me redo my volunteer application because I'd forgotten to fill in my emergency contact. You treated me like everyone else. Do you know how rare that is? I pulled my hand away, standing up. The October breeze felt cold against my skin. But you weren't treating me like everyone else, were you? You were hiding who you really are. I was protecting what we had. He stood too, his tall frame blocking the afternoon sun. Every time I thought about telling you, I'd remember the way people's faces change when they learn my last name. How conversations shift. How suddenly I'm not a person anymore. I'm an opportunity. 2 weeks later, after I'd done my Google research and had several long talks with my mama about whether I was crazy to give this a chance, Robert invited me to dinner. I expected a 5-star restaurant, a place where I'd feel completely out of my depth. Instead, he texted me an address. My own apartment building. Come to the roof at 7, the message said. When I pushed open the rooftop door, I gasped. He'd transformed the dreary concrete space into something magical. String lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of warm light. There was a small table with takeout containers from Chen's kitchen, the Chinese spot 2 blocks away that I'd mentioned loving. A portable speaker played soft jazz. I wanted our first real date to be somewhere you felt comfortable, Robert said, pulling out a folding chair for me. No pressure, no pretense. Just us. We talked for hours that night. He told me about growing up in penthouses and boarding schools, about parents who were always working, always networking, always building the empire. He told me about Harvard, about the pressure to be perfect, about how lonely it was to never know if people liked you or your last name. I told him about my childhood in the South Side, about my mama working double shifts as a hospital janitor so I could go to college, about my daddy driving trucks across the country but never missing a single one of my school plays. I told him about choosing to teach because I wanted to give kids what my parents gave me, the belief that they mattered, that they could be anything. You're the richest person I've ever met, Robert said as the city lights twinkled below us. And it has nothing to do with money. That's when I fell in love with him. Not the billionaire. Just the man who understood that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. He reached across the table, his fingers finding mine. The autumn breeze carried the scent of General Tso's chicken and sweet possibility. Below us, the neighborhood hummed with its usual Friday night energy. Cars honking, music drifting from open windows, kids playing on the basketball court 1 street over. It was ordinary and perfect. I was terrified you wouldn't give me a chance, he admitted. That you'd see the money and decide I wasn't worth the complication. I almost did, I said honestly. The Google search results had been overwhelming. Photos of him at charity galas, business articles with numbers that made my head spin, society page mentions with models and actresses on his arm. But then I remembered something my daddy always says. Judge a man by how he treats people who can't do anything for him. And you've been nothing but kind to those kids, expecting nothing back. His thumb traced circles on my palm. They give me more than they know. When Marcus reads to me, when Sophia finally masters long division, when they trust me enough to share their dreams, that's worth more than any business deal I've ever closed. 6 months later, on a Sunday morning at the animal shelter where I volunteered, Robert got down on one knee between a cage of rescue puppies and a mama cat with her kittens. Diana Goodson, he said, pulling out a simple sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother, the only member of his family who, he'd told me, cared more about people than portfolios. You've shown me what real wealth is. A generous heart. A life of service. Love that doesn't count the cost. Will you marry me? I said yes through tears, and the shelter staff cheered. We made plans for a small, intimate wedding at Bethel Baptist, the church where I'd been baptized, where my parents had married, where my community gathered every Sunday. It was perfect. Simple. Real. At least, that's what I thought. 2 days later, Robert's mother called. I'd never met her. She'd been in Dubai for some business acquisition when Robert first told his parents about me, and every time we'd planned to meet, something came up. Another merger. Another crisis. Another city that demanded her attention. Diana, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. We need to talk about the wedding. My parents want to meet you, Robert said one evening, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite read. They've invited us to dinner at the estate. The James estate in the Hamptons was everything I'd imagined and nothing I was prepared for. The driveway alone was longer than my street. The house, mansion, was all white columns and perfectly manicured gardens. A butler answered the door. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a modest navy dress that was elegant but not flashy. I'd had my hair done. I'd practiced my handshake. My mama had given me her pearl earrings and told me to walk in there with your head high, baby. You're just as good as anybody. But the moment Margaret James's eyes landed on me, I felt every ounce of that confidence drain away. So you're Diana, she said, her voice as cool as the marble floors beneath my feet. She didn't extend her hand. Just looked me up and down like I was a piece of furniture she was considering returning. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Where did you attend university, Diana? Margaret asked, delicately cutting her filet mignon. Chicago State, I replied. On a full scholarship. How industrious, she said, the word dripping with something that wasn't quite a compliment. And what do your parents do? My mother works at County General Hospital. My father is a long-haul truck driver. The silence that followed felt deafening. Robert's father, Charles, tried to steer the conversation to safer topics, but Margaret wasn't finished. And where did you grow up? The South Side. My parents still live in the house I grew up in. Another tight smile. Another exchange of glances between Robert's parents that I wasn't supposed to notice. After dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom. The house was so large I got turned around on the way back. That's when I heard voices coming from the library, the door slightly ajar. She's Ghetto, Charles. Margaret's voice was sharp, disgusted. Did you see those nails? Hear that accent? She's completely unsuitable. This is a disaster. Our son is making a colossal mistake marrying that woman. The floor beneath me felt like it was falling away. My carefully manicured nails, I'd gotten them done special for this dinner. My accent, the way I talked, the rhythm of my neighborhood, my mama's southern roots mixed with Chicago streets. Everything that made me was ghetto to her. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in this house. I somehow made it back to the dining room, told Robert the first wasn't feeling well, and asked if we could leave. In the car, he knew something was wrong. What happened? I stared out the window at the manicured lawns blurring past. Your mother thinks I'm ghetto. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Diana. I heard her, Robert. In the library. She called me ghetto, unsuitable, a disaster. My voice cracked despite my best efforts. She thinks you're making a colossal mistake. He pulled the car over, his face pale in the streetlight. I don't care what she thinks. But I do. The tears finally came. Because she's your mother. And she's never going to accept me. In the car, I held it together for exactly 3 minutes before I broke down. She called me ghetto, I sobbed. Your mother. She said I was unsuitable, that you were making a mistake. She hates me, Robert. She hates everything about me. I watched his knuckles go white on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched so tight I thought it might break. He pulled the car over. Tell me exactly what she said. I repeated every word, every inflection. Robert pulled out his phone and dialed before I could stop him. "Mother," he said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "I know what you said about Diana. You called her Ghetto. You disrespected the woman I love, her family, and everything I value." He paused, listening. "No, I don't want to hear your explanation. If you cannot see Diana's worth, if you cannot respect her, then you don't deserve to be part of our lives. You're not invited to the wedding." He hung up. Then he made another call. "James. It's Robert. I need you to cancel the wedding at Bethel Baptist." My heart stopped. Was he calling off the wedding entirely? "And I need you to call the events coordinator at Versailles." Yes, the Palace of Versailles. "We're getting married in the Hall of Mirrors. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to call. Make it happen." He turned to me, his blue eyes blazing with something fierce and protective. "If my mother thinks you're not good enough for a simple church wedding, then I'll show her, and the world, exactly how wrong she is." "Robert, you don't have to do this," I said the next morning after a sleepless night. "I don't need some grand gesture. I don't need to prove anything to your mother." "This isn't about her," he said, taking both my hands in his. "This is about showing you how I see you. Like royalty. Because that's what you are to me, Diana. You are brilliant, compassionate, beautiful, and worthy of a wedding in the most magnificent palace in the world. Your mama worked double shifts to give you opportunities. Your daddy drove thousands of miles to be at your school plays. They gave you everything they had. The least I can do is give you a wedding that honors that sacrifice, that honors you." The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind. Robert flew my parents first class to Paris. My mama cried when she saw the seats. He arranged for custom gowns for my mother and my 3 best friends who would be my bridesmaids. He hired a world-renowned photographer. He took care of every single detail. When the media got wind of it, billionaire heir to wed teacher in Versailles, it became the wedding of the year. Robert's family was invited. An olive branch, Robert called it. A test, I thought. Margaret RSVP'd yes. So did Charles and Robert's younger sister, Elizabeth, who I'd never met. The response came through their assistant, formal and cold as winter marble. "She'll come," Robert said quietly, reading the acceptance. "But whether she'll truly see you is another question entirely." I thought about my simple navy dress, my mama's pearls, the way Margaret's eyes had stripped me bare. Now she'd watch me walk down an aisle where kings once stood. The morning of the wedding, as I stood in a suite at the Hotel Lemurus, my mama helped me into my dress, an ivory gown with delicate lace cap sleeves and a sweeping train that made me feel like I was stepping into a fairy tale. "You look like a queen, baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The ceremony was set for golden hour, when the light would pour through the hall's 17 arched windows and bounce off the 357 mirrors, creating an effect that was nothing short of magical. As I walked down that aisle on my father's arm, flanked by gold leaf mirrors and crystal chandeliers, I saw Robert waiting for me. His eyes were filled with tears. Behind him, the hall of mirrors stretched out in impossible beauty. I also saw his family in the front row. Margaret sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable in her designer dress that suddenly seemed understated compared to the opulence surrounding us. This was my world now, the gesture said. This was how Robert saw me. The ceremony was perfect. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Robert promised to always see me, to always honor where I came from, to always stand up for our love. I promised to never let anyone, including him, make me feel less than worthy to stand in my truth, to love fiercely and without apology. When the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," the hall erupted in applause. The golden light danced across the mirrors, multiplying our joy into infinity. My mama sobbed openly. My daddy beamed with pride. And Margaret James looked like she'd swallowed glass. At the reception, as guests mingled beneath the chandeliers and a string quartet played, Margaret approached me. Her eyes were red. "Diana," she said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Robert started to step forward, protective, but I touched his arm. "It's okay." Margaret and I walked to one of the enormous windows overlooking the gardens. "I was wrong," she said, her voice breaking. I was cruel and I was wrong. I judged you based on things that don't matter. Where you're from, what your parents do, how you speak. I didn't see what my son saw. I didn't see your grace, your intelligence, your enormous heart. She wiped at her eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I see you now. And I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. I looked at this woman who had shattered me with a single word, who had made me doubt my worth, who represented every gatekeeper who had ever looked at me and seen less than. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It wasn't forgiveness, that would take time. But it was acknowledgement. It was a first step. She nodded, understanding. Your husband loves you very much. The way he looked at you during the ceremony. I've never seen him like that. Happy. Completely, genuinely happy. A small, sad smile crossed her face. You're good for him. You make him better. He makes me better too, I said softly. Margaret glanced back at the reception, where Robert stood talking with my parents, my daddy laughing at something he'd said. I hope someday you might give me a chance to know you. The real you. Robert and I now run the Goodson James Foundation, funding literacy programs in underserved communities across the country. We've opened 12 learning centers, provided scholarships to hundreds of students, and created mentorship programs that pair kids from working-class backgrounds with professionals in every field. We still volunteer at the Southside Community Literacy Center every Saturday morning. Some things are too important to leave behind. Margaret has become one of our foundation's biggest supporters, and one of its hardest workers. She's learning. We all are. But the biggest lesson I learned isn't about love transcending class or standing up to prejudice, though those things are true. It's this: I didn't need a palace wedding to prove my worth. I didn't need Robert's grand gesture or his mother's apology to validate who I am. My mama's double shifts, my daddy's long hauls, my students' trust, my own hard work, those things already made me royalty. The Hall of Mirrors didn't make me a queen. It just reflected back what was already there. And when our daughter was born last spring, we named her Grace. Not after elegance or refinement, but after the thing that saves us all. The ability to see people for who they really are, to forgive, to grow, to love beyond our limitations. Because that's the real fairy tale. Not the palace or the billions or the dramatic gestures. It's choosing each other every single day and building something. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story. Because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you. I don't want you to miss it for anything beautiful from that choice.